Experts by experience. Real conversations, real people, real stories.
Hello, and welcome back to our Experts by Experience podcast. Today, I've got a guest with me. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Nick. Yeah, I'm Rik. I work for Offploy as the Training and Advocacy Manager.
Amazing. Long title. Lovely to be with you today, Rik. So let's start. We always start our podcast with a little bit of an introduction so the listener can gauge a little bit about who we're interviewing today and kind of what we're going to pull from that really valuable story. Can you start by sharing a little bit about yourself and about your journey?
Sure. Yeah. Well, without going too far back, in summary, I had a long career in the Air Force, both as a regular and a reserve. And at the end of that time, I did something silly. So I ended up with a conviction. And at that point, obviously, my whole world came crashing down around my ears. I didn't know where I was going to end up at the end of it all. I didn't know who might still be with me after the end of that experience. And I didn't know what I might be doing for work again. So when I came out the other end, just in quick summary, I was sort of looking around at various organizations, various jobs, and I came across this chap that I know you've come across, Jacob Hill, who founded Offploy, and he was very keen to bring me on board, but then we had all of the COVID lockdowns and everything else, and Offploy went into, furlough. That was the term, wasn't it, at the time? Went into furlough. So at the end of all of that, then we had another conversation, and I joined as a senior social employment advisor. So I was actually advising people on the front line as our candidates. And after a few years, I've sort of moved on and now ended up as training and advocacy manager, working with great people like Catch-22.
Amazing.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, right. That was what a succinct story. Also, what a throwback, furlough. I completely forgot about that period. Yeah, really difficult. Okay, so that was kind of the timeline of you meeting Jacob and kind of coming into this stage of your life. How did you meet Jacob? How did that happen?
And that's an interesting point. I was kind of working a bit with an organisation called Shannon Trust, who are also in this space, and they do a fantastic job. And I happen to be currently living in Lincolnshire, so they were helping me, giving me some support, etc. And one of their senior people, I think, mentioned Jacob, and I can't remember actually how it all came about. But anyway, long story short, I ended up meeting up with him, and I can't remember whether I found him through social media or whether, I can't remember the detail. But certainly he was mentioned by this lady, Christina, at Lincolnshire Action Trust. And that's kind of how we ended up connecting and coming into where I am now. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, lovely. Really paints that picture of kind of that moment of connection. Maybe it would be helpful as well just to speak a little bit about what you were looking for in that moment. So you said you had this how long were you in the Air Force? Was that quite a lengthy career?
28 years, but regular, reserve, and all sorts. So I did have times where I was like the TA, part-time reserve, but doing other jobs, but also doing that. And then I came back to it full-time again. So about 28 years in total. Okay.
So yeah, a significant amount of time. So you kind of had that, chunk of a career. And how did that experience kind of feel for you to go from that to kind of having this conviction, and I'm guessing having a bit of a life-altering moment? Like, how was that moment for you?
It was very, very difficult because I think, generally people in the forces have kind of got good status, credibility, public image, whatever, and it's a massive fall from grace. I was always with the Air Force doing lots of quite high profile roles and public facing things. And it was very difficult, but I have to say they were very good. Their pastoral care was excellent throughout. And, I've got no beef at all with the Air Force in terms of the way they dealt with things. And ironically, I was still a member of the Air Force till the day I was released from prison. It doesn't normally work out that way, but actually, it did. And so they continued their care and support throughout my time in prison, which was really, really good.
Yeah. And is that like an abnormal way for that to work? Normally it would cease before that. Yeah.
I think it varies, and I can't give you a definitive answer, but I think normally there's some form of ending of the relationship before somebody goes into custody. But no, it didn't happen in my case. And one or two people who were veterans inside were quite surprised because they said, "You can't possibly still be in the Air Force." I said, "Well, actually, yes, I am." But hey, that's aside. But no, I can only speak highly of the RAF and how they dealt with it.
Yeah. Okay. So then how was that? So that's kind of one period. It feels so trivial, right, to chunk our lives in these ways. But sometimes I think for the person listening to this podcast, who, a lot of these podcasts are streamed in custody, as well as in the community. So they are available for people who will be in that situation that you were once in. How was that prison experience for you? How was custody, and how did you find that within yourself?
There's a number of points in that question, so I'll try to break it down a little bit. I mean, first of all, I'm quite a resilient person. I've been through a lot of different things in my life, so I try to almost a little bit detach and just go, you know what will be, and I'll just deal with each day as it comes. So the first day I was put in, it was late in the day, and I was put in a really horrible cell. I mean, it was a grotty cell. But the next morning when they unlocked, this great burly fellow came and sort of tapped on the youngish guy, but big strapping fellow came and tapped on the door and sort of said, "Oi, mate, you're in with me." And I, what? Now, it turns out he was the kind of a bit of Mr. Big on the wing. So he kind of looked after me, took me under his wing a bit, etc., which was very nice initially. But the chaplaincy through the RAF chaplaincy, so the prison chaplaincy had been connected with the RAF chaplaincy, and they came to see me very, very quickly and said, "We've got your role as a library orderly," which is a nice position. It's not one of the top trusted ones, but it's a good position. And I'm very fortunate. I had a good education, I had good life experience, whatever. So they said, he'll be good in the library. So I got a library orderly role very, very quickly. I later became the kit orderly, and I reorganized all of the store because it was a mess, absolute mess, and I like things to be organized, so we spent a bit of time doing that. And then I became what's called a pad mate, which different prisons have different things. They have PID workers. It's the advice desk, prisoner advice desk pad. So I started doing that role, and at the same time I also became a Shannon Trust reading mentor and a shelter peer mentor. So I had quite a few different roles that meant that I had better access and the door was open more often than some, and I was able to help and support people that were really struggling, because whilst it wasn't easy for me as a newbie to the situation, I could see people who literally their entire world had just fallen to bits and they were emotionally and mentally in pieces. I took the approach that I've been on lots and lots of military training courses, and I sort of said in the back of my head, right, I'm just going on another course. However long this is, it's another course. I'm away from home. I'm just doing this. And that was my mentality on it. Now, it also helped that my partner absolutely, completely stood by me and came to see me very quickly, and my parents were fine. And, almost everybody that I've ever had any contact with was really, really supportive. And I was really touched by that. And one I will mention, A friend of mine is quite a significant national journalist, which I won't mention for his sake, but he got in touch with Jeffrey Archer, who wrote the Prison Diaries. And Jeffrey Archer wrote me a really nice note. So I got a note from Jeffrey Archer when I was in there, sort of saying, I can't remember exactly, but sort of keep your chin up, take each day at a time, you'll get through it. And that was really nice as well.
That's huge, Rik. And was that, how did that feel at the time? Was that really impactful for you to have all of that support? I mean, you said it helped keep you afloat. Do you think you realized that you had, all these people that were really there for you? Did you feel that?
Yes, I did. And there were a lot of people inside who did not get any letters, didn't get any emails coming in, didn't get any external financial support. And as you probably well know, Nick, I mean, the amount of money you get in prison is negligible. Now, I know the canteen's not very expensive, but you still need to have some money if you want to buy those little biscuits and the extra treats that you don't get through the system normally. So I had no problem with that. And I was very, very fortunate. So the other thing I did, we sort of, my pad mate and I, pad mate as in pad worker, if you know what I mean, this role, we set up a kind of a food bank. So what happened was that people that had surplus food, often they just throw it away or they just chuck it on the snooker table or something. And I said to everybody, okay, if you've got any surplus, let us have it. And then new lads coming in, what we'll try to do on their first day is offer them some extra stuff, just to boost them a little bit. So we had boxes under our beds that had, where people got extra cereals and stuff and they didn't want it, they give it to us. And some people hate muesli. Some people hate cornflakes. Everybody loves Cocoa Pops. So we would always end up with surplus something that people didn't want. And you get a new lad arrive on the wing, you go in and say, right, okay, I know you've got your pack, but what did you get? And they go, oh, I've got bloody Weetabix, don't like, I go, okay, what do you like? And they go, oh, I like muesli. Right, have a pack of muesli. No, what do you want? I said, no, I don't want anything. This is just to help you smooth your way in. So we had a really good understanding with most of the officers. There were one or two that didn't like it and were quite difficult and, you shouldn't be having all this extra stuff. But we had the support of the SO on the wing to say, we know what you're doing. This is a good thing. You're keeping the wing happy, calm, and as much as you can, So, yeah, we did that. And that was partly a good feeling to feel that you were actually helping people. And part of the role of the padmate anyway was to help and advise. And you were alongside the listeners and people like that are on the wing. But I'm going to be really honest, most of the listeners and so on didn't really do much. So it was kind of left to the two, myself and my padmate, to do a lot of this on the wing at that time. So, yeah, it's a long way around of saying, I think the way I coped was kind of trying to help other people cope as well. And, there was always people there that were happy to be your buddy and listen and that. And there were quite a few really quite sensible people. But it's always difficult when you get a few really disruptive ones on the wing. Every now and again, one or two be put in that had really bad mental health issues and, were quite dangerous individuals. And it's really hard to navigate that. It helps that I'm 6'5" and ex-military, so I never had a problem. But people can.
A small advantage. 6'5" in the military. Yeah, wow, really interesting, and it kind of paints a picture of how important it is to find like your why or your reason whilst you're in there. And a lot of people that we interview say that, reflect stories of, I came into custody and I thought I'm going to be here for an indefinite amount of time or an unspecific amount of time. I need to find a purpose somewhere. And I love that the purpose that you found was, I'm going to support others. And in turn, that kept you afloat and supported you. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. That's a very fair way of putting it.
Can you think of, or do you reflect when you think about this experience about times when you felt really discouraged throughout this journey? So tough situations, you've said, and, anyone that's been through the criminal justice system will have been through really challenging situations. When have you felt really discouraged?
I think there were two examples I can give you. One is when you first go in and everything is completely strange, different. You don't know whether it is literally going to be like some of the worst American dramas that you see on TV, or you have no idea. So for your first time in custody, it's really tough because it's the unknown. And I think, I just tried to keep my head down, and I was helped by this guy that said, right, come on, you're sharing with me. And he kind of showed me the ropes and showed me actually a lot of kindness in the first, few days, weeks, whatever. And also the not knowing, you can't just pick up the phone. You can't just grab your mobile phone and text your mum or your dad or your partner or whatever. So not knowing, that was the worst bit. Are they all going to be there once they learn what's happened, etc.? So that was over fairly quickly, because after a few days I got communication and I was able to call people and use the phones and whatever. So that was probably the lowest point. But I think the other thing is the frustration that there wasn't any consistency from the approach of the prison officers. As I said, there were many that were very good, very supportive, saw that I and my pad mate were not causing any trouble. We were trying to do stuff that was positive. But then you just get a changeover of staff on the wing, and you get some grumpy old individual who just come in and just want to assert their authority. And, I wasn't somebody to push back hard on that, but you also have to challenge appropriately. And, even that didn't go down well with one or two of them. So that was hard when you get somebody who just thinks you're all prisoners. You just do what you're told. Just shut up. I'm the boss. And there were a few of those. And that's hard.
Yeah, it's so dehumanizing as well for that approach in a place where, it sounds like many of the systems are trying to dehumanize you, and that is just added on top of that. How did you keep, true to yourself? How did you keep knowing who you were and like feeling like you?
That's really difficult to answer. I think you just have to have reserves of inner strength, and you just have to. I've used the word resilient before. I am pretty resilient person. So, but I knew actually that the SO on the wing was very, very supportive. And so, but he wasn't on shift all the time. So you had to accept the fact that sometimes there was somebody else there. I think you just have to take the knockbacks and just roll with the punches and go with the positive when it's there. That's all you can do. I don't think, anybody that's been in custody will know that there is no other way other than the extreme that a few people adopt, which is absolutely kicking off and trashing a cell and setting fire to your bed and all the rest of it. And I saw all of that happen as well. That way only leads more frustration and more pain, unfortunately. But I get why some people feel they've got no other alternative.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense when you think of the restricted, binds that are put upon you. I love when you say finding that reserve within yourself as well, because a lot of the people that will be listening to this, we imagine will be newly on the wing or have just arrived, just been, just gone to sentencing, and actually, sitting there with yourself and reflecting and going, where am I going to find the strength to get through this? And like you said so aptly, you can find that within yourself. It's harder for some people.
I think the saddest thing, Nick, was the number of people that were self-harming, and some of them really, really badly. And I remember a youngish lad who did have a real problem with self-harming, but one day, all of the officers around his pad and whatever, and the floor was just covered in blood because he cut himself so badly. And that's just tragic. And sadly, other than trying to give a bit of personal support, there's nothing else that the likes of me could do. He needed proper mental health care.
Yeah, absolutely. And having that around you every day, being surrounded by people that had mental health issues, did you find that it held an impact on you?
You can't not have that. And there are people that, with the closure of all, well, not all, but a lot of the old asylums, as they were called, there are a lot of people, unfortunately, who seem to be kind of housed in prison, and some of them need a different environment, and it's probably the worst environment for them possible. But yeah. It's that mix of people that you would never normally mix in society, because I think all of us normally outside associate with people that we'll encounter in our normal social environment or our family and whatever. We pick our friends, etc. There, you're all shoved in together in an absolute pressure cooker environment. And yeah, it's quite amazing that worse things don't happen more often, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, you've spoken a little bit about what supporting people meant for you when you're in prison. I'd be interested to hear about kind of what that gives you as well, because your role now is around supporting others that have lived experience similar or relative to your own. So yeah, what does that give you? What does that feel like to be able to help people in that way now?
I think it gives a very good sense of satisfaction. I mean, a lot of people that I've supported have come onto our programs with very low expectations or no expectations at all. And, when you can't always find them a job, and some of them think, we're just going to go, oh, there's a job here, and put them straight in. They're quite disappointed at finding that out. But when you can also help somebody genuinely get their life back on track, and that sounds a cliche, but it's not, because so many people, as you know, Nick, have got so many barriers that mean that even if they got a job, they're not going to hold it because the other issues have not been addressed before they started work. So, I can think of loads of people that I've supported who were really struggling to heat the house or to feed themselves, or were being made homeless, or had addiction issues, or just self-confidence issues. And a lot of them had not been to prison. It's just, the system, going through the criminal justice system, had kind of had that impact on them. Or maybe they'd already had those problems and it had just made it worse. So I can think of a lot of examples of people where, by having those conversations, being a non-judgmental friend to them, you could see at the end of it, their lives getting much better, and them being so grateful. And that in itself, that's enough reward. It really is. We've touched on colleagues even now at Offploy who perhaps were on programs that I've supported, and now I've been able to say to them, well, look, we've got a vacancy. Would you be interested in applying? And they have, and they've thrived and got themselves back on track. It's just lovely to see. It really is. That in itself is so rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a brilliant curtail to the end of this short and sweet kind of dip into your experience. And thank you so much for sharing, some really, really valuable thoughts and reflections. I think it's going to be so insightful, Rik, for people that are currently in that situation looking for a purpose, to hear some of your thoughts. So thank you so much.
You're very, very welcome. And just a final thought for anybody listening who's currently in prison, it's not the end. It really isn't. There are opportunities out there. There are more and more employers that are hiring people with convictions. And also look at the sector that we're in, because there's a lot of organisations that will employ people with convictions of all types and give you another chance. And so I would always say, don't give up hope. There is hope at the end of the sentence.
Experts by Experience is brought to you by Catch-22. For more episodes, visit www.catch-22.org.uk. Now playing on National Prison Radio.